This podcast may not be suitable for young listeners.
Steve Lilly, number 14, a Bigfoot called Satan. Tom Chatham threw gravel in a rooster tail, leaving the Big Thicket campsite. Understanding what he had just witnessed was not his primary focus. Getting away from the danger was his priority. He never dreamed that Bigfoot actually existed, and now that he'd seen several, he wasn't sure he wanted any more of this Bigfoot action. What he could see in the rearview mirror, through the dust he was kicking up, were campers, the people who had trusted him to have a Bigfoot experience, filing into the road and watching him leave in bewilderment. Some were waving their arms as if they wanted him to stop. Fuck that, he thought. He had their money and they had their Bigfoot experience. That's what they had paid for, right? No one could say that he had cheated them. He didn't know where he was, so he flipped on his GPS and found a way out of the wildlife area toward civilization. And once he hit the blacktop, he pulled over and charted his route back to his home state of New Jersey. First, north to Woodville on 287, and then east to anywhere other than Texas. Planning his route home from there would be easier when he had calmed down. The image of the man he had hired to hang up the speakers, dangling in the Squatch's giant hand last night, dead, mangled, and half-eaten, well, that sent shivers through his spine. If that is what the Sasquatch did to people, he didn't want anything to do with them again. Chatham didn't feel remorse over Chet. He was just a skinny, insignificant Texan who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Chatham's thoughts naturally drifted back to himself. Everything was about him. The best part of the whole experience was that he hadn't been the one dry-humped or killed by the beast. Just get out of Texas, he thought, and then he could sort things out in his mind. It was closing in on midnight when he approached the south side of Birmingham. And exhausted from the day and hungry and needing to fill his gas tank, he exited Interstate 20 and got a room. After checking in, he opened the trunk to retrieve his bag, and he remembered that he had left his camping gear and his clothes behind at camp. With a deep sigh, he accepted that as a small cost just to be out of Texas. He hadn't spent much on the camping gear, and his clothes could be replaced. In his room, he undressed and showered, and then laid on the clean sheets, enjoying the chilled air from the AC drifting over him. Without turning out the lights, he fell asleep. His cell phone woke him 10 minutes into what would have been a great sleep. The ring jolted him so that when he answered, he sounded out of breath to Renee Tinzit. She almost heard a hello through his breathing. "Where are you, Tom?" she said. "What? Where are you right now?" "Well, I'm close to Birmingham," he said. "When will you be back in Jersey? We need to meet. Roger and I want to talk about that fiasco of the Bigfoot excursion. You've got a lot of explaining to do, mister." Renee had been a pain in the ass throughout the planning stages of the trip. With her and Roger living in the same state, she had called Tom daily to ask questions and make sure he had everything covered. To Tom, everything had been covered. He had chosen the place based on the stories that came out of the Big Thicket, and he had collected money from several attendees. More families and couples had registered without paying, but it was a matter of time before he collected all of it. He was shooting for a $100,000 event, but with all that settled, Tom had resolved himself to the fact that some would have questions, and he was prepared to answer them all. But he never counted on Renee Tinzit. She was tenacious. She was a bitch, a breathing, walking nightmare. "Tom, are you there?" she said. Tom had begun to drift off again. Yes, Renee, I'm still here. What can I do for you?" In his ear, Tom heard his email notification chime. He paid no attention. "That email you just got? You need to look at it." "Can I call you back, Renee? It's late and I'm very tired," he said. "Okay, big boy, get your sleep, but I will expect a call from you tomorrow early. Now there's a video attached to that email, and when you see it, you're going to call me." Chatham laid the phone on his nightstand and immediately went back to sleep. There was nothing that bitch could have sent him that could be that important. He would find out the next morning how wrong he was. Chatham thought he could make it home, only stopping for gas and food. He was 14 hours away, but he could do that. Once home, he could rest for a while and figure out what to do next. He wasn't in a hurry. The money he had collected for the excursion into the big thicket would last a while and give him plenty of time to plan something new. He checked his pockets before leaving the room, making sure he had everything. His phone was in his pocket. 15 new messages were highlighted as unread, and starting from the top, he began to open them. When he opened the 6th, he saw it was from Renee Tenzit, and he remembered her call that night before. The message was, "Call me when you've watched the video." He heard it in her voice. He opened the video and watched. When the images began moving, it looked as if the phone was being held by someone running. Water splashed into the lens, but it didn't affect the operation of the camera. He heard Renee's voice and breathing, and then he knew who had shot the video. The campsite came into view and the image stabilized. People were standing randomly about, but some were running past Renee. The phone panned to the right, and Chatham saw himself running toward his tent. He did a loop around his campsite, looking as if he was confused. Then he threw his hands up and sprinted toward his car. He got in the driver's seat and he closed the door. 2 men ran to the car and they were yelling at him through his open window. The audio was good, and he heard them saying that there were people still out in the woods where the shooting had happened and that they needed help to make sure that everyone was accounted for. The camera moved to the driver's side window and his face was clear. It was sweating and his double chin jiggling as he shook his head, and a panicked terror in his eyes. He heard Renee's voice scream at him, saying, "Are you leaving, Tom? What the hell are you doing? They just killed every Sabe person in the area. We have to get evidence. Get out of the car, asshole." Chatham paused the video, trying to remember any of what he was seeing on the video. And from the minute he saw the creatures coming at them in the woods until he had stopped to fill up with gas 2 hours later, all of that was a complete blank. He dreaded watching the rest of the attachment, but he started the video again. The camera panned back toward the woods and captured several more figures running into camp. They were screaming in terror. Renee left Chatham's car, and she ran to the fleeing campers and met them near the community campfire. More than one voice said that others had been taken by the Sasquatch, and in jerky motions the lens went back and forth to Chatham's camp, but his car was gone. When it came into view again, it was throwing gravel on several campers and fishtailing through the area, and when it finally centered on the road that led out and disappeared behind a cloud of dust, "That piece of shit just left," he heard Renee's voice on the audio. Gunshots could be heard echoing in the woods. The campers turned to look at the noise. They were silent now. The only sounds were from Renee's labored breathing, and the camera, unsteady in her hand, continued to film. Chatham tapped the pause button again, wishing that bitch would have not have captured him on film. But there was nothing he could do about that now. He sat on the bed and tried his best to remember anything he had just seen, until he decided that in his panic he must have mentally blacked out. He continued with the video, of which, by the timeline in red on his device, showed that he was only halfway through watching. Campers stood motionless and watching until 2 big men stepped from the woods into camp. Each wore tactical vests and they carried big rifles. It was the hog hunters who had walked into camp earlier in the day. The men Renee went apeshit over for being there. "It's all right, everyone. he heard the man with the long hair and tattoos say in a loud voice, "There is no danger now. You might think about packing up and leaving." One man and one woman ran to the man who had spoken. Chatham couldn't hear what they were saying to the men until Renee jogged closer to capture what was being said. The last two hog hunters stepped from the woods onto the bank out of the water. One of them was the man who had introduced himself as Steve Lilly, and another about the same size. By the time Renee got close enough to pick up the audio, the campers had stopped speaking, and she captured the discussion from the hog hunters. The largest man in the crew began to speak. "Steve, two of these people are missing according to these people right here. They say they saw two Squatches grab one each and drag them into the woods. Looks like they ran that way." Lewis pointed to the south where Bryant and Steve had approached the kill zone earlier. Steve looked at Lewis in astonishment. Lewis replied to his facial expression with, "Looks like we missed two of them." "Okay, Lewis," said Steve Lilly. "We got to go get them. If they went south, then there's water on three sides of that area. They won't cross the water, so we're going to spread out and push them. I don't see any other way, do you? We need to move fast before they double back and slip past us to the north. Now look, this area right here, it's not wide, so Bryant, you take the right flank. You're in better shape than the rest of us, so you can run it. Hook and I'll go right up the middle, and Lewis will hold the left flank. Now, Bryant, let us know when you hit the river, and we'll start the drive then." "I'm gone," said Bryant, and he turned and blasted off into the swamp again. "Let's go," said Hook. The three remaining Squatch killers walked into the woods behind Bryant. "Can you get to them?" A voice could be heard in the audio of the video that Chatham was watching as the camera recorded the men disappear into the thick undergrowth. A deep voice from the distance said, "We're going to give it hell." The video ended and Chatham stood up beside the bed. He was finished in the Bigfoot scamming game. If anyone saw this footage, he would be the asshole of the month. It would be shown all over the internet, and it might even go viral. And if the hunters had not been able to retrieve the missing campers, he wondered what the repercussions from that would be. Could he be held responsible for taking people into the woods as a guide and then leaving them to die? There was no way to know what the laws were on that. If he were honest with himself, he would have admitted that he didn't give a shit about those people. He didn't even know their names. As long as it didn't blow back on him, he would be fine. The money was in the bank, and that was the goal of the plan anyway. Waiting would be the hardest part, but he could do that. Chatham walked to his car, his confidence returning, and he headed north toward home. Juan Rodriguez had watched the mayhem as it unfolded. The bounty hunters had done their job, and everyone thought the campers were safe, until the group Chatham had led to the south had returned and reported that a husband and wife had been taken by the creatures. His stomach soured at the thought of what could be happening to those poor people at that very moment. His thoughts were interrupted when the team emerged from the thicket. It appeared they had a plan to go in and get the lost campers. Complete despair turned to hope when he heard the hunters devise a plan. If anyone could get this done, Steve Lilly's team could do it. Before the team left the area in pursuit of the couple, Juan asked Steve if he could help. Did he need another hand in the hunt? Lilly asked him to stay with the campers and to help them pack and leave, but most of all, keep any of them from coming into the woods. He said bullets would be flying, plus there was a chance someone else could be taken. And apparently the team had missed two Squatches in the woods. There could be more. At that point, Juan broke off the conversation and began helping folks load their cars. They needed to evacuate the area and do it fast. After helping a few load up and get them on their way, he dialed the organization on his satellite phone and briefed his bosses on the situation. Finished with his update, Juan began to ask questions. How did they miss those two creatures, he said. Don't these guys have real-time feeds on their satellite? We missed them as well, said the agent. We have the same feed that the team does. We all miss the creatures. The best we can gather is that they're underground. And if they were above ground, we would get a signature. But even now, we can't see them. Our fear is that they've taken the couple underground with them. And we've been tracking the crew. We are aware and proceeding accordingly. How's the evacuation going? There are only 3 vehicles still here, said Juan. Everyone else has left. The last should be leaving in a minute. Well, except for one couple that will not listen to me. She's a stubborn one. Yeah, that's the Tenzit couple, Juan. Forget about them. If they want to stay, you can't force them to go. I need you to hang around and be there in case the team needs you, said the voice of the agent. I'll be the last one out, sir, said Juan. I had no doubt you'd say that. Excellent work. Now give us a sit rep if anything major happens. Otherwise, I'll expect your written report next week. The agent broke the connection. Juan walked to the 2 families he knew would be leaving and he said goodbye. He then walked to the edge of the woods and waited for the team. He expected shooting to begin at any moment. The team had not walked far on their drive, and within 30 minutes, Bryant had located the Squatches. One Squatch could see him and he could see the beast, and neither made a move. Bryant clicked his mic and reported to the team. You guys approach slowly, he said into his mic. Now I can't move, and when you find me, stay back. They're underground. I can see the hostages and they appear to be alive. Now this is going to be tricky, fellas. Bryant had walked slowly, creeping along like he was back in Afghanistan, placing his feet carefully as if he were avoiding IEDs. Scanning the ground and the trees as he went, he had not seen movement from wildlife, much less a squatch. There had been a large tree blown down by a storm. He made the decision to crawl over the massive trunk instead of skirting around the mountain of a root wad or the upper end of the tree. And when he dropped from the trunk, a few feet above the pool of water, he tried to be as quiet as possible, but nothing can suppress the sound of a man's boots hitting water. It was a sacrifice he made in the moment to keep moving forward. No sign of life meant that was a decent gamble, but when he hit the ground, he saw it move. It was so well camouflaged in the leaves and mud that, had it not moved, he might have stepped on the creature's head. Just in front of him, maybe 30 yards ahead, were the eyes of one of those creatures. He didn't dare make eye contact with the beast. He looked slightly to the left and he called the team on their comms. Soon he saw movement to his left. It was one of the team. He wasn't sure which one. Look at me, Bryant. It was Hook's voice. Look over here at me, brother. Don't act like you know they're there. Can you see 'em? Said Bryant. Not yet, but I know what's happening. Now move your head my way so you can see me. Bryant did as Hook said. Now tell me what you got, said Hook. I see one set of eyes low in the leaves. He's not laying prone. He's in a hole, it looks like. I can see bright colors. It's the missing people. It's their clothing. They're moving, but they're not making any noise. It's a good sign they're alive. I agree, said Hook. That's a damn good catch. They were waiting for you. You happened to see them just in time. Man, if you'd walked a little further, they were going to ambush you. They're waiting for you to get close. Now look, we've seen this a few times, so just hold your position until Steve and Lewis get here. It'll be just a minute, then I'm going to tell you what to do. I think this will be fun, brother, so get ready. As nervous as Bryant was, he grinned at Hook's last words. He repeated the words in a whisper to keep his spirits up. Make it fun, he thought. Make it fun. Lewis and Steve now stood behind Hook. They had heard the chatter and they knew what to do. After the plan was relayed, Steve and Lewis moved around in front of Bryant. They put distance between them and were approaching the Squatch hide from behind. Okay, Bryant, start talking in your regular voice and move to your right a few steps. We need 'em to focus on you while we get into position. When I give you the word, I want you to take a few steps toward the hide. And we're going to get 'em coming after you, and the three of us will take 'em down. Now, they're probably going to come at you in that fucking spider crawl. Don't flinch. Take one out if you can. And remember, we can't see 'em yet, but when they come out, we will. Are you ready?" Hook's voice was the most calming part of the exchange. Bryant thought Hook would have been a good officer in a combat situation. The dude never seemed rattled. "I'm ready, but what about the people in the hole? What about the other Squatch? I only see one." "He's probably in that hole with the other one, and they won't bother with the hostages while they're coming at you," said Steve. "They're just looking for an easy meal. Now we're all set up. Start moving, Bryant." "All right, here we go," said Bryant. Bryant had flipped off his safety when he noticed the Squatch watching him from the hole. He raised his rifle and got the Squatch's eyes in his scope, and then he stepped forward one step. He didn't expect the creature to blast out of the hole when it did. He had only taken one step, but leaves erupted from the ground as the giant beast crawled out of the hole with speed Bryant did not comprehend. With any other animal in the forest, he had time to line up his shot and squeeze the trigger, but this Squatch was faster than he anticipated. Even so, when he felt the slight recoil into his shoulder from the 3.223 rounds, he knew he was on. The creature was dead from the 3 rounds to the head, and then he piled up on top of Bryant. Luckily, the momentum of the Squatch carried over and past Bryant, so that he wasn't lying under the 500-pound lump of snotty, shit-stained excuse for wildlife. He rolled back up to his feet in a flash, and he put 3 more rounds into the bottom randomly, just because he hated this thing. He had 15 rounds left in his mag, and he turned to engage the rush from Squatch number 2, but it never came. "That happened faster than I expected," said Bryant, out of breath. "Hook should have told you not to raise your rifle. You can blame him for everything," Steve said, laughing into his mic. "That's funny, Steve, but where's number 2? Hook was looking around with his rifle ready to fire at a threat that no one could see. 4 bounty hunters stood still, rifles raised, looking over their scopes, watching for movement, any movement. The woods were eerily quiet except for the woman in the hole crying for joy at her freedom. "Ma'am, please stay where you are until we know it's safe up here. Can you do that for us?" Bryant said, still panning the woods for the next charge. "I got him," said Lewis. "Hook, he's in the oak tree to your right. He's right straight above you." Hook didn't move. He knew if Lewis saw the tree beast, then he had him in his scope. The creature had been looking straight down, apparently about to jump onto Hook, when Lewis started shooting. Steve backed up Lewis's shots. "Here he comes, Hook! Move!" Hook was only able to take 3 long strides straight ahead before the several 100-pound sack of guts and bones hit the ground, blowing water, mud, and other forest debris into the air and all over Hook. Limbs followed for a minute and crashed to the ground, 1 and 3 at a time, and they broke into pieces of shrapnel and exploded into the air. The woods were finally quiet. "I love watching those fuckers hit limbs when they fall," said Steve. "Did you see how many times he bounced off those limbs? That's the best one yet, Lewis. Damn good shooting, brother." "Did anyone bring a towel?" said Hook. "Are we clear?" asked Bryant. "We're clear," cried Steve. "Go check on those people." Renee Tenzett sat on her back porch overlooking the pool and guest house at her estate. She was watching the video she had taken but didn't send to Chatham. Unlike the video she had taken earlier, this image was stable. She had stood stationary while she held her phone. She watched the edge of the tree line in the makeshift campground. The dark-skinned man was the only camper left, and he stood with his back to her at the edge of the woods. Shots rang out, several rifle blasts that echoed throughout the flat area. The Mexican man walked forward and into the trees, maybe trying to see better, she thought. 4 or 6 more blasts from rifles echoed, and then it was quiet again, and the Mexican, Juan Rodriguez, stayed put. Eventually, the 4 hunters walked into the clearing and into the afternoon sun. 2 dirty and tired-looking individuals walked among them. The male was limping from an injury he may have endured at the hands of the Sabe people, she thought. Renee was sure she hadn't met the 2. Silently, she wondered if the Squatches had dry-humped that woman, or the man for that matter, as they had done to her earlier that morning. Renee could still feel that creature's legs locked around her waist and feel the snot dripping onto her face and hands. She had started the day seeking a mystic experience with the enigmatic Sabe people, as some YouTuber had begun calling them. Chatham had picked the word Sabe up from this video maker who had a bigger following than he had, and he had used the word with great success. Chatham claimed the word had been given to him to use by the creatures themselves. Renee had heard the word a year before Chatham began using it in his excursion promotional videos and knew he hadn't gotten the word that way. Some said the word was from an ancient Native American language, but they could never get the tribe straight. She wondered if the word was even used by anyone other than the most orthodox followers, or was it made up to satisfy the hunger of the devout Bigfoot community to make the subject even more mystic than it was. Throughout the last 24 hours, Renee Tenzet had figured the Bigfoot game out. It was a bit like studio wrestling. It was all fake, but everyone behaved like it was real. What the hoaxers and scammers didn't know was that the creatures were real, and they were not the cuddly koala-type animals that fed the mysticism and held the attention of the people who followed the topic, and were self-proclaimed experts on the creatures, but never left their sofa. She had bought it line and sinker, and that meant there were still hundreds, maybe thousands of those who still thought that way. Some of those people had money, and Renee made the decision right then that she would never be prey again. She was now a predator, and if Chatham, that fat-ass idiot, could scam all the couples she saw following him a few days ago, she could do it too. She looked back at her screen and she watched the men in the video talk among themselves and that Mexican man. They adjourned their meeting and they spread out, one walking toward her. "Do you need some help loading your car, ma'am?" said the big man with tattoos and long hair. "No, thank you. My husband has loaded the car. I wanted to stay and make sure the couple made it back safe," Renee lied. The man stopped and looked at her with an odd expression. She knew he was confused. She was now acting like a normal human being, nothing like the rabid maniac she had projected while in the woods earlier that day. The man walked away and helped the remaining campers load and leave. Renee thought she turned the video recording device off at that moment before walking to her car, but she hadn't, and she watched the video. The screen was blank, but the audio was clear. She fully expected to drop in the driver's seat and leave, but as she approached, she saw that their camp was still set up. The tent, their bags and cooking gear, pretty much everything they had brought, was where it was that morning. "I thought I told you to load this fucking stuff up," she screamed at Roger, who was sitting in a lawn chair fiddling with his smartphone. "What?" Roger tried to say, but she cut him off. "Get your ass out of that chair and load this shit. We need to go. Do you think you can do that without me telling you every move to make?" Roger didn't respond, and all that was left of the video was their last words before pulling away from the big thicket. "Do you want me to drive, dear?" It was Roger's voice. "Do I ever let you drive? Get in the car, idiot." The video then started over. She knew it was done. She closed the app and pulled up her contacts, and then she called Chatham. "Did you watch the video I sent you, Tom?" "Yes, Renee, what about it?" said Chatham. "You didn't know there were creatures really there, did you?" she asked. Well, of course I did, he said. If you're wanting a refund, you can forget that. You paid for a Squatch experiences and you got one. I held up my end of the deal. No, you didn't. I don't think you've ever seen a Squatch or even believed they were real. All that bullshit about Shamabobo and the Sabe people and being invited to the birth of twin Squatches, that's all a scam. This was just a way for you to make money. You never counted on real creatures being there, she said. Well, you'll have to prove all this, and you have no proof of anything, Chatham said. Renee detected a weakening on his end. I have proof with that video of you running scared like a woman. If I decide to share this video, no one will ever pay you a penny again to go on one of your stupid outings. You're ruined, Tom. Renee waited for him to speak. It took a minute, but he finally did. What do you want? He asked. I want you to plan another weekend like you did at the Big Thicket, but this time we're going to lure more people in than you did this weekend. And then you're going to cut me in for half the money. We're going to be partners, and we'll run this scam as many times as we can until we can't. Now, I know you made close to $100,000 this weekend alone. That's only a fraction of what we can make if we do this right. Chatham was silent. His mind was racing. Could this work, he thought. He wasn't sure how he could increase the number of paying customers, but if she had ideas, he was open to that. Having a partner didn't sound appealing, but if they could double their income, well, then for him the gig would just perpetuate itself. It wouldn't cost him anything. Plus, she would keep the video on her computer off the internet. And in reality, Chatham didn't give a damn if that video got out. His reputation was his last concern. He had been scamming folks all his life, and he could think up a new game anytime he wanted. He just needed time. But this deal kept the Bigfoot gig going and would save him from changing his game. Now, that usually took time and money, so this was a good deal. He would let her think he cared about the video and that she had him on his heels. He would let her think she was the predator. If you swear to me that video never hits the internet, he said, I'll do this. I'll do a little research and start planning the next campout, Renee said. I'll be in touch. Next time we need to make sure there are no Sabes in the area. After the call, Renee Tinzit screamed to her husband Roger to mix her a damn Bloody Mary. Something dropped to the floor in the room that he was sitting in. She heard it all the way outside. Apparently, she scared the shit out of Roger when she screamed. She loved doing that. She opened her laptop, produced a pad and a pen, and prepared to make notes. If this worked, and she had no doubt that it would work, she could organize several excursions each year. But the first priority was to choose a place that she was sure had no Bigfoots. 2 years later. In the conference room of the offices where the organization conducted business, the organization formed by the Department of Fish and Wildlife only a few years before, agents sat around a table discussing ongoing cases and the intel they were gathering. In various locations around the continental United States, they kept files on various Sasquatch clans where they knew they existed. In the beginning, the team had concentrated on the Pacific Northwest. It was an area they assumed would be the most productive due to the hundreds of reports of the encounters. But as the group learned, the animals inhabited many other places away from that area, and within a year, and to the surprise of them all, the Pacific Northwest would become the area where they were least concerned. The animals did inhabit the forested areas of that region, but they were mostly solitary, and they didn't clan up like the beasts in other areas. They found the southeast region of the country held the clannish and vicious subspecies of Bigfoot. Half of the organization monitored that area, leaving the other 3/4 of the landmass to the rest of the team. The chatter in the meeting had been less than usual, as each group handling specific regions of the nation briefed the others and their boss on the activity they had gathered the previous week. There were several clans being monitored throughout the areas, but there had been little contact with humans. The Northeast, the Northwest, and the Southwest had given their reports. Agent Blue was relieved to know that they weren't dealing with pressing issues or a crisis in those areas at the moment. It was a rare time in his career. He looked over to the team that monitored the southeastern region. There was more activity as usual, but even in that area, things were eerily quiet. "I don't have to tell you that this is good news," said Agent Blue. "I don't remember one time since we put this team together that we didn't have an urgent matter. Good work, everyone. We might just have a slow week on our hands." He tucked his chin into his chest and exhaled a cleansing breath before he asked the next question. "Let's hear an update on Predator X." Predator X was a case being followed by the Southeast team. They had been monitoring and trying to locate this particular creature for months. Some of the team had started calling Predator X Satan, due to his size and his grotesque appearance. No one on the teams had seen the beast, but there was one photograph taken from a satellite 300 miles above the Earth. It was the same imaging technology used by the military to gather intelligence on targets all around the world. It was sophisticated and could capture the details of a man's face, and in this case, a Sasquatch's face. The creature was estimated to be over 10 feet tall. There was no way to guess its weight, but some said 1,000 pounds minimum. It was a solitary male, and it was always on the move. The technology used by the group was good, but it could not track a heat source constantly. They could find the creature one day and it would vanish the next. So far, they had 12 hits on this beast, and all in places so far from the next that the teams wondered if it was even the same creature. However, it was confirmed with a second image taken 3 months after and over 400 miles away from the first. The physical stature and facial features were identical. This was the same beast. "We haven't produced a hit on him in 2 weeks, sir," said Agent Red. "However, I asked an old co-worker from another agency to enter data that we have on Predator X in the CIA's artificial intelligence locating software. The software has produced a pattern that we will verify in the next 2 days. In other words, if X shows up in a specific area and we can confirm it, then we can predict where he will go and we can intercept him down the line. We'll need to get lucky. I will let you know if we get the satellite hit if it happens. At that point, we can deploy either our in-house kill team or our contractors. Well, I have to admit that X is unpredictable. He shows up and we track him for 6 or 8 hours and then his signature disappears. Just 2 weeks ago, I personally followed him for 12 hours. I left work that day and I toggled the tracking software and I expected the next morning to see him on the screen. But once again, he had vanished into thin air, so to speak. The only thing we can assume is that he goes underground for a period of time, every so often, to sleep. We need to find him and take him out. And although we can't verify that he has been a danger to humans, we did watch him take down a massive male deer a few months ago. Let's just say we don't need creatures like that roaming the forests of North America. Even for a predator-on-prey kill, it was disgusting. Agent Blue stared at the file in front of him. He flipped page after page once again, taking in the information he was reading and seeing. He lifted his eyes to the southeastern team. "We need to kill them all. I think we are killing them faster than they can breed, so we are making progress. It's the resources we need, not funding, but personnel. We have 1 in-house kill squad and 3 sets of contractors. At this rate, we might have them exterminated in 20 years, and that's assuming we find them all. Red, if you get a hit on Predator X, we need to make your plan a priority. I want to know the minute you can confirm you have him and that his travel routes follow a pattern. I need you to line out a plan of action and who you will send to take out Satan. This will need to move fast. Sir, the Lilly team and our in-house team will need to cooperate together on this one. I have a bad sense about this creature, said Red. Her eyes seared into blue. Well, it's your call, said Blue. Keep me posted. If there's nothing else, let's get back to work. I'd like to accomplish our mission in less than 20 years if we can, so let's stay with it. Good work, everyone. Blue left the conference room, and when he was out of earshot, the chatter picked up. With the wealth of knowledge and experience together in one place, they began exchanging ideas and theories on Satan's movements and how best to hunt this creature. Blue noted an hour later that the teams were still gathered around the conference table hashing out ideas, and they were all in good spirits. He was proud of this group. They knew the stakes. Not a soul in the conference room wanted the creature alive 1 minute longer than necessary. Steve Lilly and Isabel Garza crept through the ditches and banks of the Forkadere River bottoms near Jackson, Tennessee. They were close enough to the city they could hear traffic passing on I-40, but that's not where they had started. Isabel estimated they had walked 4, maybe 5 miles through the wet, sandy terrain that made up the Forkadere water system. A lone female squatch was running from them. 2 hours before, Steve had walked up on the nest expecting to engage more than one creature, but the female was the sole inhabitant. She jumped and ran before he could get a shot off. Steve and Isabel got right on her trail, and she was following the river channel on the north bank. At one point, she ran out of woods, and they got a visual of her loping through a cotton field that had just been planted. The shot was too long for the AR-10. If they would have popped a round or two off, it would have pushed her even farther. And at this point, they were tired and ready to get this one over with. Walking through the water, the soft soil, and avoiding cottonmouths was not their idea of fun. They would wait and let her stop and then sneak in on her to get a shot. Red had called earlier in the day and explained that weeks before she had picked up talk on social media of a creature encounter by turkey hunters. The organization had scanned the area a few times and gotten 4 heat signatures of squatches inhabiting the area. It was not a consistent group that stayed together because each time they would check, they would see a different number of animals, but never more than 4. It was not a family or a solid clan. Steve had seen Isabel with his guys earlier, so he told Red that he would get on it that day, that it looked like a 2-man job, and since it was Saturday, they would leave immediately and hunt the animals. Steve loaded his gear in his diesel and swung by and picked up Isabel, who was surprised the job had materialized that fast, and they headed straight east on I-40 and were there in an hour and a half. The intel was sketchy and they didn't know how many creatures they would be dealing with, but since there were 4 or less, he and Isabel were sure they could get it done that day. Red made sure that they knew that this was not a problem clan and they could get to it when they had time available. But the Memphis team liked making money. They had a day off, nothing pressing to do, so the timing was perfect. They waited at the edge of the field for 30 minutes, giving the she-squatch time to settle down and stop running. They had no way to know how far she had gone into the patch of woods, but these things leave big tracks and damage when they're running. Wherever she was, she would be easy to track. You think you can get on the other side of that levee, Isabel, and stay parallel with me while I walk on her trackway? Said Steve. Yeah, no problem, he said. She won't go toward that water, more than likely, but she might. If you were there, if she did, it'll save us an hour of tracking. It'll be dark in 2 hours, and I want to get this done before then, said Steve. I'm on it, Steve, said Isabel, and he backed deeper into the woods and then jogged toward the river. From there, he would get on the other side of the field levee and he would travel concealed. The she-squatch would never know he was there. Steve was approaching the trees when he heard her rustle in a tangle of vines that lined the edge of the field. "She's right in front of me. Let me know if you have a line of sight between me and that big patch of honeysuckle growing on that old gate," said Steve into his mic. "Steve, can you not see her?" said Isabel. "She's right there behind the gate, bare-facing you, man." "I don't see nothing. Do you have a shot?" "Let me range her. Let's see, she's at 127 yards. I think I can make that shot with this rifle. So get ready, though," said Isabel. Steve began walking faster to the old gate. He still couldn't see the squatch, but he figured that he would in a minute. "See if you can hit her center mass, brother. That'll get her moving. Go ahead and take the shot," he said into the mic. Steve heard the bullets whiz in mid-flight. He was 25 yards from the gate. The unmistakable sound of a .30 caliber round hitting flesh was next. The she-squatch's charge at him was next as well, and both men began firing until the beast lay 10 yards in front of Steve. Steve exhaled and allowed his heart to begin its normal rhythm, and then he looked over to see Isabel walking in the dry black soil toward him at a leisured pace. By the time Isabel made it to the kill site, Steve had removed the head and had it strapped to his pack. "Let's go," said Steve. "Damn good shot, by the way." "I could have made a head shot," said Isabel, "but your plan was better. She has a small head. I could have missed." "She does have a small head," said Steve. "It's the lightest one I've carried. Do you remember how to get out of here? We got an hour before dark, and I want to be out of here before then in case the other three show up." Isabel stopped in the field and produced his smartphone and looked at Google Maps. "If we walk a half a mile north, we'll hit the gravel road. Your truck is 3 miles away on the road." "All right, let's do that," said Steve. "Something about this tells me others are still out there. I don't want to deal with them in the dark. Hey, there's a good barbecue place I know about in Jackson. It's on me. What do you say?" After they had gorged themselves on pulled pork, they left the small pit barbecue and were on I-40 back toward Memphis. Steve's phone rang. Agent Red started speaking. "Hi, Steve. It sounds like you're driving. Will you call me back when you're not behind the wheel? We have a situation and I need to talk to you," she said. "When are you coming down to see me, Agent Red?" "Steve, just call me when you can talk." She dropped the call. "Damn, must be serious," Steve said to Isabel. "Usually I can get her talking. What do you think she looks like?" "I think she's tired of that shit, man," said Isabel. "But maybe she's playing hard to get. Maybe she has serious business on her mind." Isabel raised his hands. "Maybe I shot out a ball-and piano last night right out of my ass." "What the hell are you talking about, Isabel? You're married. You aren't in the chase like me. Now I know these women. You just give it time. I'll get her attention." "I don't think so, man," said Isabel. The conversation went back to the hunt that day. Steve dropped Isabel off at his car in the trailer park. "You might want to stick around, brother. I feel like she may want us on the job right away. Drive on over and hang out while I call her back." "All right, I'll be there in 10 minutes. I need to talk to my guys for a minute." Steve pulled into his driveway. He got out, and he dropped the she-squatch head into his boat and covered the bloody cloth sack with a tarp. Opening the back door of his house, he was clobbered with his dog Lilly, and when he regained his balance, Lilly bolted off the porch and ran straight to his neighbor's trailer. Angela was standing on her small porch. She had walked out when she saw Steve's truck pull in. Lilly ran laps around Angela and then back to Steve and then back to Angela. "I thought I'd walk over and give her a rest," said Angela. "Have you eaten yet?" It was 8 o'clock. Angela had been waiting on Steve so that she could ask him to eat with her. It had been warming on the stove since 5 o'clock. Isabel and I ate about an hour ago, but what do you have?" Steve said while he was raising and lowering his eyebrows. "Well, does it matter?" I need to make a phone call," said Steve. "I don't know how long I'll be. Isabel's coming over too. Do you have enough for 3? "Well, of course I do, Steve. Y'all come on over. I'll set the table." Steve walked inside and Lilly went with Angela. "Agent Red, what do you have for us?" Steve said into his phone. "Hi, Steve. We're going to need you somewhere up around the Hatchie River bottoms, maybe Haywood County around Thursday. I'll send the coordinates. There is a solitary male squatch that we've been tracking. We think he's going to be coming through the Hatchie wetlands either Friday or Saturday. Now, this one is a traveler. He's always moving. Once he shows up, we'll track him for you and send the feed to your handheld monitors. We haven't seen one like him in all the years we've been hunting these creatures. We'll need your whole team. Call in anyone you can find to help. I know you've had a couple help you in the past. In addition, we will have our in-house team there as well. Everything will be in the folder on your laptop." "Wait a minute. I don't like the idea of your team being in the woods with my team. Somebody might get hurt. We can handle one squatch. Hell, we just went today and took out the one with just 2 men. "Nope, we don't need your team," said Steve. "Listen, you need to read the files. We will have you on a conference call at 10 a.m. Monday. It is important that you work with us on this one. Now, trust me, when you read the files, you'll know why." "Well, this sounds like a shit show to me, but I'll read the files tonight. I'm telling you now, Red, if I don't see the need for your guys going with us, I'm going to say so." "Well, that's fair enough, Steve. Be somewhere with a solid internet connection with your laptop around 10 a.m. Monday. You got that?" "Yep," said Steve. "Any chance you'll be coming with them?" Red disconnected the line. This must be serious or she'd be joking around with me, Steve thought. Steve walked over to Angela's. Her door stood open. Lilly and Angela's German Shepherd perked their heads up off the couch when Steve walked in the door. Isabel pulled in just then. "Oh, Steve, you need me?" he said, yelling out his passenger side window. "Do you want to eat?" Angela yelled back. No thank you," Isabel said. "I just talked to my wife. She has pizza being delivered. It's movie night with the kids. I don't want to miss that, okay?" "Well, then you better get home," said Angela. "Isabel, I'll call you tomorrow. We got a job next weekend. Don't make any plans," said Steve from Angela's front porch. Isabel waved and backed away from the trailer and exited the trailer park. "Looks like it's just you and me," Angela said. She had a look. It was a sly grin. Steve had never seen it before. Steve and Angela had been neighbors and friends for 4 years. They got along well, never a misunderstanding or a conflict. Steve thought she was very pretty. She was the same age as him, and there had been a few moments where he thought it would be nice to have some companionship, but it was soon quashed by the thoughts of what he did for a living and his work schedule. Steve Lilly never pictured himself as a relationship sort of man, and he pushed the thoughts down and sat down at Angela's table. But still there was that smile. It gave him butterflies. She stopped looking at him and brought the food to the table. Steve squirmed a bit in his chair, but then settled down to eat. The conversation was good, and he was extra full when he got up from the table. It was the second meal he had had in 3 hours. Angela walked Steve out to her porch. The late spring evening was warm, and the smell of cut grass hung in the air, and the sky was clear as she looked at the few stars that she could see against the Memphis City light pollution. Steve was talking about something, but she wasn't listening, and then she did it. Angela leaned over and kissed Steve on his cheek. "I'm glad you like my cooking. Thanks for being so sweet to me," she said. Steve didn't think much of the peck on his cheek. She had kissed his cheek in a friendly way before, but she held him there a few seconds longer than usual with her hand cupped over his face. It was sort of a double peck. "Do that again," he said. "Do what? Kiss your cheek?" "Yeah, that felt nice." Lilly leaned his head sideways toward her, and she kissed him again. "I could get used to that," he said. He walked off the porch and straight to his trailer. Before he walked in the back door, he looked toward Angela's house. She was standing on her front porch where he left her, arms crossed and her head tilted slightly to the side, as if she were waiting on him to say or do something. He held his hand up for a second and looked at her a little longer than he normally would, and then he walked into his house with Lilly. In bed later with Lily's paw on his face, Steve fell asleep thinking about Angela and her hand on his face. Juan Rodriguez read through his emails while taking in the aroma of his specialty coffee. Juan lived for the Colombian beans grown in his home country every morning. It was the only time of day he smoked a cigarette. He had picked up the habit in his younger years, and some habits, no matter the effect on his health, were not worth breaking. After the incident in the big thicket, Juan's cover had not been blown. He was the organization's eyes in the field. Juan traveled quite a bit, and he enjoyed that part of his job. He was single and had no children, and that made it easy. He could leave any time he was needed. Juan attended no less than 20 Bigfoot, Dogman, and UFO conferences each year. And in addition to that, he was a member of every social media organization on these topics. His favorite thing to do was to join the campouts and excursions put on by these groups. He was away from home more than half of the year. Through the previous 3 years, Rodriguez had become a familiar face to the Bigfoot topic followers, at least to those who went deeper than the regular armchair expert. He had made good friends and was accepted into the cult. He was well liked due to the fact that he was not a loudmouth. He was not a know-it-all like many who operated and joined these groups. Juan found that those who went simply out of curiosity were the likable people who had sincere interest in the subject. The other half he hated. But if this mission had been to monitor and gather intel on remote-control car enthusiasts, there were always those annoying people who would never shut their mouth, belittle those who knew less, or just didn't have the enthusiasm the hardcore Bigfooters had. Juan watched everything and kept his mouth shut. He was there to do a job. On this day, he was on a rare visit to his own apartment in St. Louis, Missouri, his adopted hometown. The summer heat was keeping the campouts and excursions to a minimum. He had a week at home before heading to a conference in Dallas. His plan was to spend the week doing nothing but washing clothes and catching up on his Netflix series and eating from his kitchen in lieu of the restaurant food he ate 9 months out of the year. The email that caught his eye was from Tom Chatham. After the big thicket incident, Chatham disappeared for several months. When he jumped back in the game, it appeared he had a partner in Renee, and throughout the previous 18 months, Tenzet and Chatham organized and carried out 7 excursions. They were now charging $6,500 per person or family. Their little scam was growing, and Rodriguez guessed they were now pulling down between $150 and $200K per trip. It was a good racket they had going, and Juan almost admired their ingenuity and sense of capitalism. In his mind, there were creatures to be heard or seen, and if you saw or heard one, it was a life-changing experience. He knew that none of it was make-believe, but the places they had carried out their weekend tours had no Sasquatch in the area. Juan reported each planned expedition he could find to the organization, and the areas would be scanned for the week building up to the Happy Camper's arrival. And not once in 18 months had there been a Sasquatch within 500 miles of the places that Chatham and Tenzet had arranged for their Sabe experiences for the gullible public. After reading the group email, Juan wondered if it was even worth his time to report the upcoming campout to his handlers. But his job was to gather intel, real-time solid intel on everything Sasquatch in the nation. So he forwarded the information on to the agency. After sending his email, he looked back at the group message. In a bold, highlighted font, he read, "Experience the Sabe people up close and personal." And below the main text of the email were several links to videos showing people aghast and elated while on various trips with the scammers at hearing the recordings blast from the forest beyond. The noises sounded nothing like the beasts Juan had encountered, but the people didn't know that. After each video was a testimony from either Tenzin or Chatham making their sales pitch to the clapping seals. Rodriguez laughed while shaking his head. He had to hand it to the pair. They were bold. He flipped the monitor down on his laptop, walked to the washing machine, and he transferred a load of clothes into his dryer. The four men who made up the Memphis bounty hunting team sat in chairs in a plush office in Midtown Memphis. The building was the headquarters for the MC Club, of which Hook Johnson was a member. According to Steve, they needed everyone there, a place large enough to hold all the men so that they could see the screen, and it had to have a good internet connection. The president of the club let them use his office for the meeting. Now out front was a fully stocked bar, and they heard muffled music playing through the walls. "Does this place ever close?" asked Lewis. "Sometimes," said Hook. "I don't hang out here much these days. It gets kind of rowdy. I think I've outgrown it." In front of the big executive desk, an 85-inch monitor was mounted to the wall. Steve logged on to the wireless network while Hook connected the HDMI cable to the television and plugged in a webcam, which he sat on a credenza under the monitor so that whomever they were meeting with could see all four men. Then each man pulled a chair into the middle of the room and watched the screen come to life. The image on the screen showed the desktop of the laptop Steve kept for the missions and for communication with the agency. One icon blinked in the center of the desktop. No other folders or apps were visible. "We're a few minutes early. How about we look through the file?" said Steve. The crew spent 15 minutes reading each document they saw on the screen. The last two images were of a map of the southeastern United States, showing a red line that seemed to follow a never-ending pattern, and the last a photo of something taken from 300 miles above the earth. No one in the room spoke until the photo had been on the screen for a minute. "That motherfucker's huge, boys," said Hook. "What's going on with his face?" asked Lewis. "That doesn't look like anything we've dealt with before." Steve zoomed in on the image. The face was wrong. Every squatch they had taken over the years had looked different, but the same, just as human look generally the same, but each one is different. But this thing looked like a different animal altogether. Zooming in again seemed to distort the image. Steve readjusted it to normal size again. "Well, that thing looks like a squatch we killed down in Coahoma County a few years back," said Steve. "You know that job we went on where we found Jimmy Rayburn still alive? This one has a snout like that one did. Are those teeth I'm seeing?" "Fangs is more like it." "That was a slick move pitching that grenade in his hand, Steve," said Lewis. Steve didn't reply. He seemed to the others to be transfixed on the screen. An uneasy cloud drifted into the room. The team had never seen or even heard of a beast this large and as menacing in appearance. The monitor on the wall went blank for a few seconds. When an image returned, it was a woman. She was working on a connection on her end by moving her mouse around and typing on her keyboard. And when the audio broke in, the Memphis crew heard the voices in the background, but still the woman's image took up the whole screen. Finally, the woman looked into the camera and spoke. "Hi guys, I'm Agent Red. I see everyone is here. Have you all read through the intel package?" Everyone nodded. Agent Red looked to another area of her screen and opened a file. While she searched for the screen share feature on her software, Steve studied her. He had made her a running joke among the guys, always commenting on what he thought she looked like when her name came up in a discussion. The preconceived images he had so immaturely conjured up and then shared with the others, all those went out the window now that he was looking at her face and the upper half of her body. He wasn't sure how tall she was from the image, but he guessed that she was short from what he could see. Her red hair was covered mostly by a ball cap worn like an operator in the U.S. military, the bill formed in an arch with the skull pulled tight over her head. She had green eyes, something he had read somewhere was a total fluke of nature, and those were a bit obscured by a set of glasses that suited her face and made her look smart to Steve. It didn't appear that much makeup covered her ivory skin other than a faint trace of lipstick. Steve took everything in and decided that she looked like an average woman, something he didn't expect. The image that rattled around in his primitive mind was one of glamour and striking beauty. And now that he saw that she was normal as the day is long, his demeanor toward her would be different. The image of the map came up on the screen and Agent Red disappeared, but they heard her voice. Guys, this may confuse you and you really don't need to know all these details, so I'll be brief with this explanation. We've been getting hits on this big boy for months. Like most of the creatures we track, they are always visible in infrared, but not this one. He first came on the screen in the Mark Twain National Forest several months ago in Missouri. We knew by his size this one would be important to track, and we did that for 11 hours. Then he vanished. Weeks later, we got another hit and confirmed it was the same creature, but this time he was in South Mississippi, just north of Hattiesburg. Once again, we tracked him for 5 hours, and then he disappeared. Months later, we got him again in Missouri. We've had him no less than 12 times and in different places throughout the Southeast, but never in the same general area. We fed the information into the CIA's artificial intelligence software to see if it would give us an estimate on his travel patterns, and the red lines on the map are just that. And we've never seen one do this. I mean, this thing is always moving. Even while we track him and watch him, he acts like he's always heading somewhere in a hurry. In addition, he appears to be a sort of mutant creature. He's bigger, faster, and stronger than anything we've seen. With that said, we can't give you any information on what to expect other than to say that after we received the estimated travel pattern, we began seeing a multitude of missing persons cases in the area that he has traveled. In every case, no bodies have been recovered. We think he's attacking people that happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Regarding the lack of bodies that turn up in these cases, Hook interrupted. He's eating them, bones and all. Agent Red was silent for a minute. We can't all seem to agree on that assumption here, Hook, but that's what I think. So far we have found 33 cases. This thing is a killing machine. He has got to be taken down. Well, how do we find him? Asked Lewis. The map was still on the screen. One of the many lines ended with a red dot. Agent Red enlarged the image. The red dot sat on Fort Pillow State Park in West Tennessee. If the route and the timetable the AI generated for us is correct, we believe he will come through this area between this Thursday and next Tuesday. We need you there. If you can intercept him there and kill him, you'll be saving lives. He's following water, said Isabel. Look at those lines. He comes out of Mississippi and hits the Hatchie River and follows it to the Mississippi. That means he is in Tennessee right now. When he crosses the river, he will be in an area that we have the least confidence that we can predict where he will be. The next place we know for sure he will go is the National Forest in Missouri. That area is vast and not as forgiving in terrain as the Delta. We think your best shot is to get him this week, said Red. If we don't, or if you miss him, it'll be a month or more before he will be in a place that we can find him. The Arkansas side of the Delta is the least forested area on his route. It'll be difficult to know how he gets through the area, so finding him there is probably not an option. I wish I could give your team more information, but he is a first for us. None of us can figure out why he's moving all the time. He's avoiding people, said Steve. He's a smart one, probably been hunted before. He knows if he claims territory and stays in one place that someone will catch up to him with his guard down. He travels to stay alive, plus the food supplies everywhere. Agent Red's face reappeared on the screen. I think you may have something there, Steve. You can add smart to the list of advantages I gave you earlier. Either way, he has to be killed, and he has to be killed soon. Can we count on your team? You sure as hell can, said Steve, and we won't need your in-house team to come here. We can handle this. Steve Lilly only worked with others who had proven themselves capable, and even though the team that they would deploy from in-house may be well-trained and even have experience, the Memphis team had their way of accomplishing a mission. And more than that, Steve Lilly didn't trust anyone. I assumed that would be your position, said Red, but we are sending them, but only as a backup in case you have trouble. Now, Steve, before you say no, just hear me out. Your team is the most productive team we issue contracts to. This is a business decision. If we lose even one of your men, we've lost a great asset. They'll be holding in a location and they can be inserted by helicopter if you need them. The discussion over the backup team is done. Agent Blue lowered himself behind Red so that his face was visible. Having a backup team is mandatory, Steve. Move on with the briefing. I think it's a good idea, said Isabel. Are you scared of a little old Bigfoot? Said Steve. Yeah, a little, said Isabel. At least I'm afraid of this one. I am too, said Steve. Agent Blue, we appreciate that there will be a backup team in case we get in a jam. Good call, said Blue. Damn good call, said Lewis. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, said Red, we have another issue that came up today. And by the way, good call, Steve. Thank you, Agent Red. I'm not just good looking, I'm smart too, said Steve. Red burst out laughing before she could get up and out of the view of her webcam. Blue took her place in the chair. All right, listen up, guys, he said. Now, I know you all recall the Big Thicket clusterfuck. We just got intel that Chatham has organized another scam outing with his followers, and it happens that the weekend of the Sabe experiences will be at Fort Pillow State Park this weekend. We have no way to know, but I seriously doubt they will get close to the Hatchie Bottoms, but it's close. I feel like Satan will be traveling on the opposite side of the river. If that's the case, the campers will be okay. If he crosses and they do that shit they do out there in the woods with all the howling and banging on trees, he will be drawn to that. You need to be aware. Dumb motherfuckers, said Lewis in a tone barely audible to the mic, but Blue heard it and agreed with Lewis. Do you have this creature's location now? Asked Hook. We don't, Hook, but we are scanning the area. If we can't find him, it's a waste of time for you to move in. I need you on standby and ready to go if we get a hit. Do you understand? Said Blue in his nothing but business tone. If you feel confident he's coming through the area, it'll be better if we're already there, said Hook. What do you think, Steve? I agree, Agent Blue. I think we can all ditch work for a few days. We're going to load boats and gear and be in place so we can get in fast if you spot him. Steve said this as if the decision had already been made. Secretly, he was itching to get in this fight. This creature would be a trophy. Good plan, Steve. If there's nothing else, we will be in touch as soon as we know something. We can track you and you'll have handheld monitors so we'll know where you are. Let's get rid of this mutant and get back to hunting normal squatches. I heard that, said Lewis. This fucker gives me a bad feeling. We feel the same, Lewis, but we have the best team on the job, said Blue. Do the best you can, fellas. Some of the missing people throughout his route are kids. That should give us all motivation. We'll get him, said Hook. Check back this week for Steve Lilly 15, part 2 of a Bigfoot called Satan.